This is our second lecture on the Industrial Revolution. So the question becomes, why, of all the places on Earth, is England the first to industrialize? And what we're talking about here with industrialization, this is the process of developing the machine production of goods, moving away from creating goods, things like chairs or t-shirts or gym shoes, by hand, and instead having machines or other automated functions in order to be able to produce. What does England have that the other places don't have? Well, first, England is blessed with abundant natural resources, particularly the natural resources one would need in the Industrial Revolution. It has very large coal deposits to be able to provide increased temperatures, to be able to melt iron and steel and make all that type of stuff. It also has, before we even get to that point, lots of rivers. And because it's well watered with lots of rivers, this is able to provide free, clean hydropower to be able to spin big, huge, giant paddle wheels next to rivers and be able to drive the earliest industries that way. England itself is an expanding economy. Not only is it expanding within the British Isles themselves, but England also has an expanding economy overseas as it begins to grow its worldwide empire. Hitting on that growing the empire part, we begin to see England, particularly in the 16, 17, and especially by the 1800s, have a highly developed banking system. They need this banking system in order to be able to account for all of the goods and services that are being transported out of England to the rest of the world. Think about the English colonies in North America, in the Caribbean, in Africa, which we'll talk about in our next unit, in India, and in Asia. And so to be able to finance these expeditions, to finance these overseas journeys, to be able to finance these industrial opportunities in these other places, you need to have a developed banking system. England, following the Glorious Revolution after its Civil War, has a lot of political stability. We don't see an American Revolution. We don't see a French Revolution. We don't see, like we saw in our last chapter, with lots of nationalistic uprisings within England for the most part through this time period. So that's able to see a very clear and easy transitions between governments, between kingdoms, and allows for the same systems from there. Finally, England has very strong government support and takes a very positive attitude to her industrialization. On the whole, the government supports through laws, legislation, and just general positivity that they like industrialization, they want to keep it going. They understand that this is something that could be something important and help enrich them going forward. And so we can say England has lots of what the Industrial Revolution will need in factors of production. Factors of production are the resources needed to produce the goods and services for the Industrial Revolution. When we talk about factors of production in the Industrial Revolution, we're talking about three main factors. The first is land, physical, actual land, in order to be able to put factories or other stuff on that. You need to be able to have the land, the space to be able to put your factories on there. You need labor, your second factor of production, actual people to be able to work, support, take care of the machines, the factories, run the things we have. And then finally, you need capital. You need the cash money. You need the wealth to be able to finance and loan out, to be able to construct these factories, to be able to go and pay for the workers, to be able to run everything. So that's what we can say England has a lot of for itself going forward. Main industry that England will industrialize first, as we've been saying, is the textile industry. Think clothes, think your t-shirts, your dresses, your pants. So the first major inventions deal with the textile industry, and it's dealing with automating already technologies that have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years at this point. The first is the flying shuttle. This is invented in 1733. You think when you're weaving, you have your loom, you have your vertical strings, and then by going horizontally over and under and over and under, you'll be able to weave a piece of cloth. Well, prior to 1733, a person would have to go and take their bobbin and go over and under each individual vertical string, and that would take time. What the flying shuttle does is does that automatically. You just kind of shoot it one way and shoot it back the other way, and it automates and increases that process much quicker. Well, if you're able to do that quicker, you need to be able to have more string to be able to go backwards and forwards and horizontal left and right. That's where the spinning jenny comes in. Think about if you're Rumpelstiltskin's fairy tale, where you have the woman in the story spinning gold, or having Rumpelstiltskin spinning straw into gold. What are they doing? They're taking loose wool. They're going and putting it on a big giant wheel, and that's spinning those strings of wool into a piece of string or a piece of yarn, be able to go and knit or make any other things. The spinning Jenny does is be able to go and do that process, right, with several bobbins all at once. So it's not just one housewife sitting there at their free time at the end of the day, right, doing that. It's automated and being from there. So you're able to increase production of the string to be able to put into your flying shuttles and from there. Next inventions are going to increase on that. The water frame is able to take these factories, move them right out of the house into a factory next to a river. The water frame then has all of these shuttles and jennies automated with a big giant paddle wheel moving in the water, turning big gears and axles to move that all the way. The spinning mule is just a bigger spinning jenny, so you're adding more and more power. You're adding more and more bobbins to being spun at once. Those bobbins are then being placed by 1787 on the power loom, which is automatically going and spinning out patterns or pieces of fabric how you want. The last major invention, right, deals with the American Eli Whitney in 1793 with his cotton engine, or colloquially known the cotton gin. What he's doing here, the cotton gin is not very fancy technology, but what it's doing is taking a product that has lots of applications, cotton, be able to remove the teeny tiny, hard to pick out by hands cotton seeds. And so with this, you're able to go and automate this process a little bit farther, and you're able to create lots of more cotton. It's the cotton gin that is going to turn the American South into a major producer of cotton and help spread slavery from there in order to facilitate getting more and more cotton. So this is a major invention, not only in world history, but also in U.S. history. We also begin to see, all right, on top of textile innovations, transportation improvements occurring at the same time. They're using steam engines. Now, we've seen steam engines dating back to time immemorial. Supposedly, there was a working model of a pretty modern steam engine in the Library of Alexandria, right, in the Hellenistic and Roman eras, but we don't know about that for sure because it was lost, right, during it's being lost in the fire. By 1705, coal miners are using steam engines to pump water out of mines. And you think about, again, coal mines going deep down in the ground, eventually running into water tables or underground aquifers, and then just regular rainwater sitting down in the mines. You want to keep these mines clear of water. So they're already using these steam engines to pump the water out of the mines. But again, like we see with other inventions, sometimes it takes a fresh perspective or looking at an existing product and using it in an innovative way to be able to go and capitalize on different things. And that's what James Watt does. A lot of our famous inventors are Henry Fords, or Thomas Edison's, or James Watts, don't actually come up with the idea out of thin air. They take existing products, right, or existing ideas, and they improve efficiency, they make it quicker, they make it faster, they make it more powerful. That's what James Watt does. He looks at these steam engines that are already in existence and he says, well, I can make it faster. I can produce more power out of it. I can make it run more efficient. And with all those gains in power and quickness and efficiency, that makes it a better machine that you can take it instead of pumping more and more water out of a mine, maybe flip it on its side, put wheels on an axle, and be able to have it drive locomotives. And so we begin to see throughout the 1700s, moving into the early 1800s, a move away from having horses drag canals, think of your Erie Canal in upstate New York, to those big giant twin paddle boat steamboats. And then on roads, begin having people walk since they've done for forever into big, huge, giant steam locomotives on steam railroads. This is how people prior to the Industrial Revolution would make their textiles, usually at home, taking sheep's wool, taking the loose scraps that they've cut off the sheep, spinning it on a spinning wheel, usually at home in the evening when all most of the chores have been done, and turning them into yarn, spinning them on the bottoms, going from there. The Industrial Revolution that we begin to see things take off. In the upper left, we have our flying shuttle. And what the flying shuttle will do is be able to make the loom go faster by going up and down quicker, faster before. We have our spinning jenny, And what this is doing is being able to go and do several bobbins all at once, right, from the loose yarn to be able to go and put them onto our frames. We begin to go and increase that even farther with our spinning mule. And then with our water frames, you can see how a big giant water wheel would go and drive these belts, which would turn things, would make these machines run all by themselves, automating the process much farther. And so we begin to see how this then goes and builds off of other things. We already have steam engines, right, pulling water out of mines to make coal. And so again, it was then turning them, and we can start to see how they then get turned to be used to locomotives in that way. So with all of this, this helps drive a process of urbanization, of the creation of large industrial cities during the Industrial Revolution, where people are building cities and also the movement of people to cities. Dealing what we talked about, the enclosure movement, that's going to drive people, particularly smaller farmers, off the large estates to the cities, and this is where they're going and moving and living from there. Now, where we see this urbanization is building a lot around the resources. Manchester in England, in the north of England, around the coal areas, is going to see a large amount of urbanization as people move off the farms to Manchester to be able to go from there. People moving to places that with ports, say like Liverpool in England, where you're taking these goods, making them in the country, moving them to England and Liverpool, and then shipping them to the rest of the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we begin to see major industrial cities, again, as we've said, starting in England and then moving around the world. Places like London, Manchester are excellent examples of that, and even smaller ones like Leeds, Sheffield, and other cities begin to move from there. We'll dive deeper, at least in my class, into some of the problems in the industrial cities when we go with the same industrial revolution in the United States history. But a lot of these places have no development plan. And so you have cities stacked upon cities, you have people stacked on people. There's nobody kind of looking at this and saying, hey, let's plan things out. It's it's just putting places on places for that. Homes next to where there's no sanitation, all right, no sanitary codes, homes next to lack of water, people want to, if there's no building codes, there's a lack of housing, there's a lack of education opportunities, there's very little policing, particularly at the turn of the 1800s, and there's sort of all these different problems that again we could spend hours and hours and hours diving into. But it's basically a big giant mess. The big takeaway is that there's disease and crime everywhere. Again, remember in the 1800s, how are people getting around all these cities? What's being moved down there? The same way it's been moving since the Roman Empire by horse. And so think about if you have a city like New York that has four horses for every person or a ton of different horses from there. Think about all the horse manure and horse urine that's piling up every single day and causing all sorts of problems. Why are people in the turn of the 1900s so excited for cars to come? So that they're hoping they can remove all of these horses that are pooping and peeing and dying in the city streets, and think of all the smells and the flies and all that stuff that's being bred that way. Important to understand is that there's very poor working conditions in these industrial factories. You know, people who are working 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. And here's the kicker that, again, is hard for a lot of freshmen in high school to understand. The same exact thing over and over and over again. If you're industrializing it, if you're breaking each individual task down to one component part, that's what you're doing for 14 hours a day. And so when you're sitting there in the back of a Joliet Catholic classroom complaining, oh, about this or this, oh, this is boring. Well, again, you at least get to get up after 45 minutes, walk around and go to a different, you have a change of scenery. You're not doing the same exact thing minute after minute, hour after hour, again from there. And it's important to understand is that if you take a second off to daydream, to think about this, to scratch your nose, to turn to somebody else, you're working in highly dangerous conditions where if you're not paying attention, right? The machinery will take off a finger like it's nothing, will rip off your ponytail, right? Or any loose hair, and with all the skin that's attached to it. And you're also looking at women and child labor issues as well, where you have children as young as 3, right, going to work in New Orleans, shucking oyster for a nickel a oyster, right? You have 10, 12, 11-year-old kids going down in the coal mines. Coal mine owners love having child miners because that allows them to not have to build the mines very big to accommodate a big man-sized body. You can make it a foot, foot and a half shorter to be able to accommodate a child's size from there. And again, that's going to lead to lots of different abuses right from there that people are going to walk from there. These factories aren't lit very well, right? These are dangerous machines, right? There's kind of working off of old things from there. It's all sorts of problems. Again, we'll dive deeper into this with my class in U.S. history, but these current conditions are not very wonderful in any way, shape, or form. Remember that all this stuff is being run by coal. So this is putting out thick, toxic, noxious smoke being pumped into the atmosphere all the time. You can go on and on all about the global warming and air quality stuff. Just imagine breathing all this stuff, smelling all this stuff, having this stuff seep into your clothes, right? And smelling all this and having this well from there. Right? And again, it doesn't just linger in the 1800s, right? This is a picture of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the 1940s before you had smoke control, right, and dealing with issues of industrial smog. And you can see this is a regular day here for Pittsburgh, how you can't see the skyline or possibly a block up the street because of how thick all the stuff from there. Again, the football team for Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is the Pittsburgh Steelers, after all the steel workers, and steel factories that are in the town that's there. And so again, process of urbanization is going to have all these different people being stacked on top of each other, like you see here in New York City at the turn of the century, or here on Easter Sunday on Broadway in the early 1900s as well. Just people on top of people all over there. And you can, again, there's no cars. This is all horses. And all those horses are having their own biological functions that's going to increase all the different problems. This is going to lead to lots of diseases and other stuff. If you want to pause the video and work your way through there, right, you can see how many people died of inflammation of the brain, right? All 11 of them. How many people died of dysentery? 32 people in this 1 week in New York City, right? And again, dysentery is very bad diarrhea. You can talk about unknown causes from there. If you take a look down to the totals, right, underneath here, you can see that under 1 year of age was where most of these people died. Over 100, right, babies died, right, under 1 year old, right, from this. And again, they're coming all over the place. And that's just one example here in New York. You have people dying of being eaten by mountain rats, right, in this great picture that I found. And then again, if you read through this, poor William Snyder, right, who was 13 years, 6 months, was killed by being swung around by the heels of a circus clown. So lots of interesting ways to die here in these industrial cities. Again, poor working conditions. If you're not paying attention, you can pounds, tens, hundreds, thousands of pounds of liquid molten steel on someone. If you're a foot off, they're working 16-hour days, right? Some of these steel workers had to do the dreaded changeover where they're working 12-hour shifts. So that means you're working from, say, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The second shift comes in and work from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Well, they would do that for 1 week, and then they do the dreaded changeover where you would work for 24 hours straight and then get off on the opposite shift so that you could enjoy some of the daylight. And again, that's just one of the great horrors of this stuff. And again, you can see the drudgery of trying to build all these things in the coal mines, in the subways, right, with kids as a young 10, 11 years old, or if not younger, being dropped from there. And again, having to work in all these different city stuff in there, sweeping up poop, driving taxi cabs, selling newspapers, or pretzels like the guy on the upper left there. These are dirty cities with poor water, with poor cleanliness, right, with stuff all over it. And you can imagine the breeding ground diseases they were. And again, scenes like this were common where the old man on the left is teaching this young boy, right, to work in the sawmill here in Indiana, the same job that he's going to be doing until they both are going to eventually look the same. Child labor, again, is a big thing that particularly the United States and other places are going to go and try to fight against in the early 1900s and the late 1800s, so that you have kids who are growing up to get an education so they can try to work their way out of some of these industrial jobs so that you don't have to be these 10, 11, 13-year-old boys in the upper left here, right, who are there in a glass factory at midnight, right, at the turn of the century. What comes out of all of these different problems are increased class tensions. The Industrial Revolution is, and I can't emphasize this enough, going to create capital E enormous wealth throughout industrial nations. That wealth is going to be very much consolidated, right, in the owners and people who are inventing all this different stuff. The word millionaire does not exist in the English language until the Industrial Revolution in the mid 1800s. Right? When you have all these people building railroads, they're making money hand over fist, right? Money that they can't even spend on who knows or what until they're made from there. In terms of who does the Industrial Revolution help the most, it's going to be the middle class. The middle class is a social class made up of skilled workers, and this is a key thing, having a skill that a machine can't replace More importantly, a skill that you can't just gra- grab any random Joe Schmo off the street and only to get it. These are professionals like teachers, doctors, lawyers, right? Your middle management business people, and then also even your wealthy farmers. And they're going to have a lot of success out of this. They're going to get, and we talked about this a little bit before, a comfortable standard of living. They don't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from. They don't have to worry about where they're going to sleep at night, right? They're able to have a comfortable standard of living, be able to kind of go from there and have a little bit of money left over at the end of the week and the end of the month to be able to enjoy some of the new cool things that are being invented that are coming out in society, like sports that we'll see take off in the mid 1800s. Where the major class tensions occur is that while the upper class is getting enormously wealthy, the middle class sees a stability within their lives. The working class will see a little change, little improvement to an actual worsening of their lives. And that's going to lead to, again, for a lot of problems from there. Some of the reactions to the Industrial Revolution include what we read about for our homework with the Luddites. Luddites were people who went around England destroying labor-saving devices in factories and the textile mills in the early 1800s. They were so angry at these machines taking their jobs that they went around and tried to get rid of them, knocked them out so that they could keep their jobs that these machines were doing quicker, faster, more efficiently, and cheaper. This term, a Luddite, is still applied to people today who are resistant to technology. So you can think about people who still walk around with flip phones or don't want to join the Facebook or other stuff because they don't want to have their information stolen. And again, this is something that can be an adjective to describe people even today. Those are our Luddites, again, driving around, smashing up our spinning jennies, our power looms, right, in order to be able to go and keep their unskilled labor that these machines are replacing it so that they have ability to afford food, a place to live, clothing, ways to feed their family. Some people are angry, they don't like trains. And so we see here this brief manifesto against trains in 1833 in Vincennes, Indiana. And it reads, 20 miles an hour, sir? Will you not be able to keep an apprentice boy at his work? Every Saturday evening must take a trip to Ohio to spend the Sabbath with his sweetheart. Grave, plodding citizens will be flying about like comets. All local attachments will be at an end. Will encourage flightiness of intellect. Voracious people will turn in the most immeasurable liars. All their conceptions will be exaggerated by their magnificent notions of distance. Upon the whole, sir, it is a pestilential, topsy-turvy, harum-scarum whirligig. Give me the old, solemn, straightforward, regular Dutch canal, 3 miles an hour for expresses, and 2 for a jog and journeys, with a yoke of oxen for a heavy load. I go for beasts of burden. It's more primitive and scriptural, and suits a more religious people better. None of your hop, skip, and jump whimsies for me. So this canal stockholder, right, who is an economic interest in not having the trains exist, doesn't want people to go 20 miles an hour. And so you can see people are always going to be resistant to change, whether it's something as cool like a railroad or something even farther with other stuff that way. So this industrialism is going to go and spread throughout all of Europe. And how does it spread out of the Great Britain? Well, it's going to get the United States. Again, industrialism starts in Britain and England, and the United States and England are at war at the turn of the 1800s, right, with the War of 1812. It's going to take industrial spies to be able to steal this technology and be able to bring it to the United States. Workers in these factories in England were not allowed to immigrate out of England at all. They had to stay there. They signed contracts to do that. And so businessmen like Samuel Slater, right, recognize that the United States has a lot of resources and has money and be able to do that, would like this stuff, but they can't just walk it over there. So they would go and steal it the only way they could. There's no cameras invented. So they would take mental snapshots. They'd be allowed to be able to go into these factories, and these business owners would happily show them all the great industrial stuff, knowing that, well, they're never going to leave England. They would then rush home, copy down as much as they could, or hop on a boat, sail over to England, or from England to the United States, write it all down, and then be able to go and create carbon copies out of their brains, from their memories. You're going to be able to go and do that. And so it's from this early industrial espionage, the United States will literally explode with factories in and around Boston and Lowell, Massachusetts to begin with, and then spreading mostly through the north, right, as it grows from there. As we'll see when with our study in U.S. history, is that the United States will see lots of exploitation of the laboring class, the working class, by big business, which will lead lots of into social class and economic tensions. Europe is going to be hurt by the Napoleonic Wars. And so they're going to have a very slow start into industrialization because at the turn of the 1800s, they're either being taken over by Napoleon, fighting Napoleon off, or trying to rebuild after the Napoleonic Wars. Germany will see pockets of industrialization around groups of natural resources, and as Germany begins to unify, will help unite those pockets together. Those pockets of industrialization around the country will later be linked by railroads, and they'll, unlike the United States, who just stole their technology, will pay handsomely, right, to import their technology from Britain to Germany to drive its industrialization there. The economic strength that will be gained from Germany industrializing will help spur Germany's military growth, and we'll see how this will lead right into tensions that will start World War I. In France, France had a much stronger agricultural economy that didn't see a lot of the sweeping changes we saw in England. So that's going to encourage much more measured growth within France as it industrializes. Because it's much more measured and not as exponentially jumping up like you see in the United States or Germany or in Britain, we see less class tensions. Other countries in Europe are hurt by their geography. Spain and Austria are examples of countries that in Spain, right, with its lots of class issues and cultural issues, along with not very many natural resources, hurts its geography. Austria, with all the Alps and the other stuff, it's very hard to go from there. And we talked about the Austro-Hungarian Empire having issues being able to unite all the different groups of people within there. So that's going to lessen its industrialization as well. To finish for today, the key thing to understand, the major driver industrialization, particularly in our own backyard in the United States, is the railroads. So you begin to see in the 1830s slivers of railroads, right, inching their way out. By the 1840s, they begin to snake farther and farther. By the 1850s, we begin to see them moving farther inland from the Atlantic seaboard off of major river routes until we finally explode after the Civil War with this spider web of railroads across the United States. And this was what's going to help the United States become the major industrial powerhouse that it will become in the 20th century is with the railroad industry.